Phoebe's just shaking, making noise out there.
All right. James, welcome to the Sharpening Strength Podcast. So stoked to have you on here today. Thanks for coming on for today's episode.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So I want to kick things off today by having you give listeners an overview of your story and your background, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, great. So, you kind of went through the bio there, but I started playing sports in high school, like a lot of people. A lot of injuries. Was a pretty good athlete, but after my playing days were over, I really started getting interested in how the human body works and movement and things like that. I think that's probably a pretty typical story for people, and how I can help athletes and just people in general approach their goals and stay healthy and out of pain and do the things they love to do. And so started there, got a lot into, obviously me and you go way back. So me and you have a big history of talking through things, and I really credit where I'm at now to kind of having you to talk through those things. So that was really helpful as a friend there back in those days, getting into the Kelly Starrett stuff early on, and then kind of transitioning into, different movement stuff. And now, I don't know, a bunch of stuff happened, went to school, all that stuff, got my bachelor's in exercise physiology in a small school in Illinois, and got a CFSC certification. Mike Boyle's gym over there in Boston. Everybody knows Mike Boyle. Those guys are all great. Kevin Carlos guys. So got that. And then I got a position at a small gym here in Oak Park, Illinois, called RC Training and Fitness. And Ross Oberlin's the owner there, and transitioned into the head coach role there, taking care of kind of global programming for the gym, as well as coordinating our athlete training program. Just trying to grow now, trying to get back into things now that, things are starting to open up over the country and navigating that. And so it's very different for the fitness world right now, but that's kind of really short version of how I got where I am.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And was there, so in your kind of personal training, your own self-training background, and then transition into the coaching world now, did you feel like this was a gradual change, or was there one of those injuries you mentioned, any of those things that flipped the switch maybe a little quicker than other things, or was this a gradual, slow build?
Yeah, I think, I had a pretty significant shoulder injury that I actually did it, it was probably 6 years ago now, but I ended up tearing my labrum in my right shoulder playing softball. But that was definitely an injury that had been around since probably my high school lifting days. I think, at least for me, my early on training was, hey, when you don't have a wide scope of what training and for performance is, or what training is in general, it's kind of just like, how big can I get? How strong can I get? And that's kind of, you kind of throw everything else to the wind. So that's definitely what happened. And then, as you start to understand, like, oh, I'd like to do this for as long as I possibly can. What does training look like for me as I sort of develop as a coach and as a person who still loves training. So definitely some injuries, had some ankle injuries, things like that it's like, okay, well, I can, there is that moment, I think, with people where it's like, hey, I'm getting older now, and I am kind of like feeling the effects of maybe old injuries or things that I haven't dealt with in the past. And it's like the big question there then, and it's not an easy battle, is okay, how do I adjust my training to still do things I like and get what I want out of training, but still be good to my body and like, that whole longevity game. That has definitely shaped injury and movement history has definitely shaped, how I'm training today. Yeah, and how I've been able to kind of get back to lifting those heavy weights and doing the things I want, probably stronger than I've ever been, But it does take some time to kind of address things.
Yeah, it's a good point too about you noticing that even when you were trying to get bigger, stronger, faster, I would guess, knowing you now, that you're probably stronger now than you were back in those days because you're moving better, you're doing these things. And there has to be that moment though. And for some people it happens quickly with a more serious injury. For some people it's like, I'm tired of my knees hurting and my back feeling so stiff
Yes.
and feeling like I can't move around and that
Right.
I have
Guess
to
I got
warm
to
up
stop.
or, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Which is not necessarily the case. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
And
right. And warming up becomes a huge part too, where it's like, hey, yeah, you can get really specific with warm ups, and yeah, that stuff isn't the most fun part, but your outputs are going to be better. You're going to feel a lot better. It's, yeah, 100%.
yeah, and the warm up piece, and for those that know a little of my background too, from college football, definitely push performance, push size, push speed over everything. And then there was a transition in a PT school of picking up knowledge and realizing mentally and logically, okay, I need to start shifting towards longevity. But there was this in between time where my warm ups were taking 45 to 50 minutes because I was still recovering from stupid stuff maybe I did earlier, but also I wasn't I was focusing too much on the warm up and not moving in a way, not focusing on improving my movement and doing these other
Totally.
things that caused the warm up to become mainly the workout, which isn't a way to live either. I think at that time I thought it was either performance or longevity. And I thought
Yep.
longevity meant I had to warm up and foam roll and do band work for an hour a
Right.
day. But
Totally.
I think like we've both figured out is that you can have longevity and you can have performance, and they actually go hand in hand if you can have some intelligent programming with it.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. There's that. I think, when we first started kind of training together and that kind of stuff and getting really into it, it was, it's really that spectrum of like the rehab into the prehab, like that spectrum really went to the movement prep kind of foam rollings, myofascial like release, that kind of stuff. And I think sometimes it swayed for a while there. It swayed really far in that direction. And now things obviously, you dive into the physiology of what was actually happening with all that stuff. But like, we're understanding now that, yeah, getting some mobility is good, but then you do have to load those tissues. And in order to have any lasting effect, it really comes down to loading tissues and gaining some resilience in different positions and things like that. So that you can be safer and push the weight a little bit if you want to, or, get that adaptability for sprinting or whatever high intensity thing you're trying to do.
Yeah, whether it's sport or whether it's life, these are things we have to be performing. And that's where my misbelief was of gained too much knowledge and I guess traditional medicine knowledge of like squatting could be bad for your knees and your back and
Right.
deadlifting
Yeah.
not good. So, and if you have limited mobility, I shouldn't be pressing overhead because I'm going to wreck my
Right.
rotator cuff. And the more we look into these things, we're like, okay, is that like, how can we go for better movement and then still load these things, which actually improve my mobility so much more than simply
Yes.
just doing a bunch of stretching work. But at the same time, these myths that are out there are kind of overplayed and can create a fear in these movements that are super healthy for just living, whether your goals are athletic performance or just like being strong and confident and feeling good. They're
Totally.
the same training programs are necessary. It just varies a little bit in intensity and load and some exercise selection, but the principles are the same.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all it is, right? It's the, I don't know if people know listening, maybe it's Kevin Carr's kind of movement is medicine kind of mantra. It's like, look, yeah, it's like, you just got to find the right dose of exercise, and you can do that by manipulating load, frequency, intensity, volume. There's a lot of ways that you can take those overarching principles and apply them to individuals, and get them where they want to go. We'll get into some of that probably when we're talking about programming, but yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think it's a good transition in because I want to talk more about, especially as it relates to what you guys do really well, with your gym, and it's this small group training model that I think there's these popular trends that fall on, like we talk ends of the spectrum. There's the group style training that's exploded of big CrossFit classes, Orange Theory,
Yeah.
F45 training, any of these more boot camp style big gyms where a ton of people, one or two coaches, which have done some great things for getting people healthy, for helping them lose weight, for do these things. But then there's the other side of the highly sought after one-on-one expert coaching, which tends to be more where we fall. That's very highly individualized and highly personalized, which is great, but also tends to come at a higher price point, which can make it hard for some people. But there's what you guys do is this small group training model that's a little bit of a hybrid between the two. And I feel like this hasn't gained as much popularity as some of the other, the one-on-one stuff or the big group class training. So can you talk a little bit about the biggest reason why someone would consider small group training, maybe a little overview of what it is and what you guys do, and then why that's beneficial over the one-on-one settings or the big group settings?
Yeah. So yes, the semi-private training model, I mean, we can talk about it through two scopes, right? I mean, like you were talking about, for the individual, for the members, for the clients, it's kind of that, it's the accessibility in terms of price, because you're not necessarily getting full one-on-one training with a person, but you're working with, you know, a small class size with your individualized program with one coach, in a, you know, much smaller facility, than like an FFC. So I've kind of got eyes on everybody. I can check in with everybody as a coach. So there's a lot of benefit there, because you're still getting that individualized attention and coaching. But you're not doing it, but you're just sharing a space with other people. And so there's a lot of benefit there. We can kind of dive in there, and then you can look at it in the scope of, it's a really sustainable business model as well, because, you know, personal trainers are great, and there's a lot of successful online coaching and things like that. And right, there's different options for different people. I mean, that's kind of how every industry works. So, but you know, when you're talking about scheduling or burnout as a coach or something like that, it's I don't have to schedule 15 clients every single week when and adjust their schedules, right? And then I'm kind of up and down, and I don't know what my schedule looks like, from one week to the next. So what we use a scheduling app right now. We're using MindBody, but you know, it's like, hey, here are the sessions. Early morning sessions to mid-morning, people go to work. Then we have afternoon sessions, you know, into the kind of, you know, later evening. And it's like, hey, pull yourself on and off as you see fit, and what works for your schedule. Plan that out as long as you want to, and we'll just make sure that you have your program ready. And so there's kind of a benefit there too. It's like, in terms of just having a longevity of a business, right? Like, so when you're looking at it that way, it's like, okay, well, now we have our set times, and we can start building models into that business plan, right? Start building out general templates, and we can start working on how gym flow works and what our systemized warm-ups are, and what our, you know, it's kind of start there, lay those kind of vanilla plans, and then get more specific with individuals, through email and things like that. So I think that's a huge benefit. And then I think, you know, one of the biggest ones is community, which I didn't realize when I first got into, you know, working at RC. I was like, oh wow, like, yeah, like everybody knows everybody. And obviously Russ has had clients there for, you know, since he's been training, but for as long as he's been training. But it's like, you know, you go in there and you get a new person, and you know what it's like. You join a new gym or something, or new anything, and you're like, where do I fit in here? Like, who are these people? And then within like a month or two, you can't really help but like know everybody and what they're doing and what their family's doing. And it's like this little supportive family. And that is really, it's really impressive how people can get together like that. And you know, help each other, and it's like, hey, how you doing? So and so. You get people kind of generally being in the same class period, like times as other people, and it's like, hey, where were you guys last week? I didn't see you. So there's like some accountability there from a community perspective, and just a lot of great things come from that. Yeah, it's also we talked about the cost a little bit, right? It's not going to cost as much. It's going to be a little bit more accessible price point because we're not slotting out certain times. We're not, I don't have to adjust my schedule based on a single person. It's kind of like, so that works really well for people. And I think in that environment, in the semi-private environment, I think it's what we do really well is take the world of fitness and strength training and whatever, and really kind of mitigate some of that intimidation that I think can just inherently come from superficial layers of what our industry looks like from the outside, and say, hey, look, like, no, if your goal isn't to if you're not going to be in a powerlifting meet, like that's fine. That's not your goal, right? Like so it becomes very individualized, and but also being strong and having competency in movement and being generally strong will benefit your life just in general. So just having a general physical capacity to do the things that you love, whether that's keep up with your kids, stay out of like that low back or whatever has been bothering you. Maybe you're a weekend warrior. You get a lot of guys that like to go mountain bike and wakeboard and things like that. It's like, just, you can't, that stuff, you're able to do those things a lot more safely and a lot longer into your life if you have some of that stuff. So it's kind of taking away that intimidation factor. And then, the biggest thing is, look, you're still getting customized programming, right? When we onboard you, it's like, what is your training history? Like, what's your injury history? Are you currently in physical therapy? Are you currently dealing with an injury? Like, what's going on? What's hurt you in the past? What has worried you about fitness in the past, or other trainers, and we can kind of adjust our programming to, and plug that right in for you. And so progression is a huge thing, right? Knowing when to progress and regress people and where to start them. And so I think those are really the main points, the main benefits to people in terms of semi-private training over just going. Also, I mean, I could go on and on, but there's accountability too, right? It's like, hey, where have you been for 3 weeks? Like, oh, I was on vacation, or I had travel work. Okay, great. Let us know if you need a program for the hotel room or whatever it is, right? Just communicating with people, having that level of accountability, still getting a lot of the real benefits of personal training in a kind of a smaller, comprehensive, little more affordable package.
Yeah, that's a great overview of it. I want to dive a little deeper into some of these things, because I think that the value for people listening on this too, I think there can be value from, so we get the two sides people I picture listening would be the side that already have their routine established. They're doing something that works. And that's, I think some of the programming principles that you guys apply that we'll get into are going to be beneficial. But there's also a lot of people that are maybe starting out on their fitness journey. They've tried stuff, it hasn't worked. Maybe they haven't quite found the right fit. And that's where I think introducing some of these things to this semi-private model in comparison to more the one-on-one side of things versus the big group stuff, there's just so much overwhelm of options right now that giving people some clarity on, okay, where do I fit, and could this be a good fit for me, or would I be better for maybe one of these other models? And I think the cool thing is the you get the personalization and the programming expertise of more the one-on-one side of things, but you still get that community piece. And that's something that we have a hard time fostering in our business, because we're highly individualized one-on-one type stuff. And there's not this community of people aren't around other people regularly. There's the passing of appointments or online. We can create a little bit of a community, but it's not the same thing that you guys have to offer. And there's that accountability that comes with it. There's people just knowing you as a person, and the power of that, totally, of knowing what you're doing in your personal life, and
just relationships are huge. Someone. Yeah, definitely. I think, that's true. And right, like everything's different, right? And I think, we do get ex-CrossFitters that are just like, I just like kept getting hurt or whatever it was. And, I'm not in the camp that any movement is inherently bad, and it's like, you try not to get into the, to knocking other models and things like that. But, I think when you're talking about, people as individuals, you really have to be careful about throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what fits, and seeing what sticks, and so yeah, it's huge, to really be able to get specific with people and let them see the progression. And I think, relationships are a great point, right? Like from community, you build relationships, and in terms of what that looks like for me and a member is like, look, I could be the best coach in the world, and unless that person is unless there's some buy-in in terms of like how they feel about me as a person, and just building relationships and showing that I actually generally care about them. I'm just another person that's giving them information. I might as well just be a YouTube channel or something like that. So that's huge to get the buy-in. Is like, you have to really know people, and that those things develop, right? Like and there's different strategies, I think, to say, hey, here's what we do really well as a business if you're coming in the door. Because we're not just going to be best friends we're not going to be really close off the bat. It's like, here's our model. Here's what we do really well. Here's why you'll be safe. Here's why we'll help you achieve your goals. Here's why we're going to try to keep you out of pain. Here's our network of people if that does happen. You have to have semi-private training. Really gives you an opportunity to have general models, put them into place for different situations. And yeah, you constantly figure out that, you have to have your head on a swivel always, and have to be willing to abandon ideas and things like that. But those are the things that I think initially help people. And then it's from there, it's like, hey, building relationships. And then it becomes a lot easier to like, well, what are your goals? Like, what are you worried about? Like, why was this training session maybe not so great today? Like, was something going on at work, or like, and so, yeah, a lot of benefits there from the relationship standpoint as well.
Yeah. And that builds trust. It helps the relationship side of things, allows you to create, I think, longer lasting. It gets rid of that intimidation, the getting lost in some of these other big settings can allow people to slip through the cracks, even if, whether that's yourself personally, if you've experienced that, or I'm sure you've seen someone around at the gym that maybe just didn't get connected enough to be able to see through a program that might have worked really well for them. And the perfect program only works if people can stick around long enough to follow it. But
100%.
I want to dive a little more into your guys' assessment process, because I think this is another big thing too, because we do a lot of this, and we have the luxury in the one-on-one setting, but in big group settings, a lot of people get plugged into general programming things. Some places are better than others for sure, but some places don't have much of a formal assessment in place. It's like, hey, you're here for your first day. We'll maybe take a little bit of the weight off from what everyone else is doing, but you're just going to jump into today's workout, and let's see how you do. So can you talk through a little bit of how you guys take people through an assessment process? Because you're getting people coming in different walks of life, different starting points. So how do you guys go about determining where people are starting at and what they need to work on?
Yeah. So traditionally, when I started, depending on the person, we use FMS as a jumping off point, just for coaches in our scope. Look, we're not, I know there's a huge discrepancy of like, oh, what is the FMS what is any assessment actually telling you? It's pretty specific to that person. Like, it doesn't mean that they're not going to get hurt, but it's like, okay, if you need your heels, like, if you can't get in a position, that really informs us as coaches, like how we're loading that position. And it's like, and then it creates buy-in, because it's like, look, we have this assessment, right? We have this FMS assessment. We're doing these things. This is why remember when you did that FMS assessment, here's maybe why you're starting body weight, heels elevated squats, right? To kind of drive that position. So that's a good jumping off point. It gives us kind of a good basis for where people are and how people are moving, right? And it's my job also to start. That's been a huge kind of rock of mine. We have our 90-day meetings, and it's like, hey, what are your big rocks for the next 90 days? It's always improving assessment strategies, and trying to get better as coaches and get our coaches on a level where, hey, if you're seeing something from a movement perspective, how are you addressing that? Or, how are you, um, interpreting that objectively and bringing that back and how does that affect this individual's programming? So a big thing I'm actually kind of in the middle of right now is Pat Davidson's Rethinking the Big Patterns, which is a big database. He tours around the country with it, but really smart guy. And it's just like, he's got this layout, 13 movement patterns that we could possibly get through, right? Like, vertical push pull, horizontal push pull, sagittal plane, all the planes we can possibly move in. But not only that, it's like, what do I need to see in the sagittal plane before moving people to staggered stances, to unilateral stuff? And people come in and so that becomes very useful just objectively. It's like, hey, you're going to get really good at this so that when we're down the road here and we're asking you to do unilateral stuff, or you're at a spot where maybe that's, you've progressed to those points. There's kind of these checkpoints. So right now I'm in the process of kind of systemizing that for our gym in terms of, okay, everybody kind of starts with a foundational pattern, right? Or foundational program. And that program is, let's understand kind of what the flow of the gym was, right? Like you're brand new. I'm not going to give you these super, it's got to be really accessible. When you walk into the gym, it's like, okay, I know what a hinge is. I know what a goblet squat is. Like learning, it's a big learning component early on. And then it becomes like, so from that perspective, we can really bring people down and really teach them, hey, this is okay. Do you feel that? Do you have the motor competency? It looks really good, but are you feeling the things that you're supposed to be feeling at the bottom of that squat? Where are you feeling that press? Where are you feeling that deadlift? So there's sensory motor competency aspect to that too. And I think that in itself, that first month of programming also helps us assess, because right, FMS, very much body weight, great. What happens when I put a kettlebell in your hand? How do you move when I put you in the trap bar? Like those are the things that matter because those are the activities that you're doing. And so we kind of like to build movement competency that way. So that's kind of one of my big things right now is systemizing that for our coaches. Hey, when you're looking at somebody in sagittal plane, are they translating forward or backwards too much? Like we generally want to see this. Everybody moves a little bit differently, right? You're going to get a little lean for some people. Some people are able to stay straight up. That's great. Are they feeling the things they're feeling? Great. Maybe they finish up that program. Maybe we do another month of another phase of where they're just doing dumbbell goblet squats. So it's very slow progression. And sometimes people really appreciate that. Like you got, some of our older clients who are like, my knees hurt. I need to, like, I'm nervous. I'm scared. I've never done this before. I've been hurt before. And then you've got other people who are coming from, who are marathoners or ex-athletes. And they're like, when do I get to barbell snatch? And it's like, we're not doing a ton of barbell snatching with our general population clients, but like, if that's really something you want to do, now we have this system where it's like, do you have this competency? And we don't sway from that. Right. So that's the philosophy. And so a lot of the assessment just comes from early progression and making sure you have competency and building on that. I think I'm always trying to learn more and gain things, but to me, that makes the most sense. Right.
Yeah. A couple things you said that were really great that I want to touch a little deeper on. And I love when you talk about having people feel it, because this is something that we talk a lot about too. And there's too often we fall into, does a movement look good? But we don't check in on how that actually feels, either whether that's we're doing a movement on our own or we're working with one of our clients, because you can have someone, and we see people all the time, they come in with back pain, they're pretty good movers, but they have a really good looking squat at the visual level, but they're feeling everything in their back, or they're feeling a bunch in their knees. And that usually comes down to some of that, the neural component, the neuromuscular component of how are we coordinating this movement, how are muscles firing appropriately during it, is the perception of the movement, where it needs to be. And do you do you guys work on that a lot in terms of it sounds like you're bringing a lot of awareness to that, of letting people know, either asking them or letting them know where they should be feeling it, or do you guys have a
Yeah.
process for that?
Yeah, I think in general, right? And some people, like when they first start deadlifting, it's like, well, I feel that in my low back. And you're like, I mean, yeah, you're going to feel some of it in your low back. When you're starting with a, 25-pound kettlebell, I'm not so worried about you feeling in your back for the first couple of weeks. Like you're just learning this. And that's okay. But if that continues to be a problem, you need to let me know. So having open and communication, and obviously that goes back to that relationship piece. They're going to be more willing to kind of tell you these things and be open. But yeah, no, we do. To answer your question, yes, I think there are certain things in certain planes. Oops, that's my computer. Certain things in certain planes where, yeah, here's what I'd like you to be feeling, right? I'd like you to be feeling this in your quads. Here's where you should probably be feeling this. And that takes time. Like just as people learn a motor pattern, like it takes time to understand, oh, those are the muscles I'm supposed to be feeling. And we can't, and people have no reference for that if we're not telling them in some general way, hey, here's what you should be looking for, right? Like, and if you're not feeling those things, like, then it's like, okay, well, what is that, a stability issue? Like, if you're not getting stability in your hip, are those forces leaking into your back, whatever it is, right? But it's, and obviously we're not dealing in trying to fix people's pain directly. So it's just like, that's a really good way for us to go, great. If it looks good, it probably flies. And I was like, okay, that's all I need to know. But also, no, there's a huge sensory motor competency part. And how can I possibly move you into positions like unilateral positions that have more stability demands if you're not feeling that in a bilateral stance? It's so yeah, that's something we're starting that was kind of a big thing I was working on these last couple months here, is really implementing that into what we're doing, into systemizing that a little bit. Getting people to feel things, I think, is really important.
Yeah, it's great. I think it bleeds right in the next point too, of you talked about earlier, setting people up for success, and you didn't directly word it this way, but things of like propping someone's heels up for making these modifications, these regressions or progressions to set people up for success, I think is huge, because that allows people to feel it. And instead of arbitrarily putting them into saying, oh, you have to squat with the barbell on your back and you have to squat below parallel right day one, yep, is setting someone up for failure in a lot of these places. And they might feel it more in places where they shouldn't, because they're simply not ready for it. So I think what you touched on earlier was using these modifications to help people to feel that. And do you want to touch a little more even on maybe like a deadlift or a squat and how that might look?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we use we use a general progression, right? So we'll have bilateral squat, obviously goblet squats first. If people need heels elevated, that's something. I'm actually becoming a bigger proponent of heels elevated just right out of the gate, because it really puts people in that, it really allows people, whether or not it's an ankle mobility issue or whatever. I think that's kind of a big implement when it comes to like, well, I don't think their ankle mobility is great, so I'm going to elevate their heels. It's like, no, honestly, that just puts you in a really biomechanically advantageous position to recruit muscle fibers just based on biomechanics, and get that deep level of flexion and keep your torso upright, and drive through those heels a little bit, which is something that, like, I've come full circle. I remember yes, it's very important. I'm not saying don't grip the ground with your big toes, and that's not an important thing, but people understand, like, when you're driving your calcaneus into something, like, that's going to produce a lot of force up the chain. And so just, getting people in that position, using the squat as an example, it's not necessarily just a mobility thing. Sometimes it is. It's like, okay, do you feel what that feels like after a couple of weeks when your quads are really sore and you've got maybe a little bit of glute involved and things like that? I want you to feel that when I bring you off that 2x4, whatever we're elevating the heels with. And as you're sort of loading it heavier and heavier, like, remember that those are the muscles that are going to drive you to move in a healthy way. And then from there, it's like, we're sometimes we're starting people just body weight, heels elevated. From there, we're usually going kettlebell goblet squat. and then we have standards, right? We have like just general standards. Okay, if you want to go to the next thing, you've got to do 2 sets of 8 with our heaviest kettlebell, right? Or something like that. Maybe not for squat. It'd be, I forget exactly what our standard is for squat at the moment, but it's do 2 sets of 8 with that, with really good form. Okay, great. Now we can start to maybe move you into things like front rack, double front rack kettlebell squat, or eventually into something like a safety bar. But I'm vertical spinal loading is something that I'm just kind of like, how many people really actually need that in the general population? So it's usually, if people want to get their hands on a barbell, I really like the front squat, and just teaching them how to do that, because you're driving that, that terminal extension in the thoracic spine, and getting them in a really good position. But anyway, so that's an example of our squat, right? Deadlifts the same way. Start with kettlebells. If people really have trouble with hinging, we get them on their knees, kettlebell behind their back, kind of the handcuff deadlift. We use dowel rods too. And then it's like, okay, fine, good. Maybe there's a transition period where it's like, I'd like you to warm up with that dowel rod 3 points, and then drive that pattern a little bit in between your warm up or something like that, and then load it, and then understand. And I'll watch you, right? I'll watch you and tell you if you're doing it right. And here's what you should be feeling in this position. And as we load it, so it becomes very systemized. And it's, yes, as a coach, you're always like, there's going to be things that throw you off, right? You're never going to go in there. It's never going to be exactly like the book. But I think the more prepared you are in those situations, the better you are. So yeah, progression is a big one.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think what you're talking about too is what a lot of people are missing, and that's laying down the foundation work. And one thing that you guys do really well is most people skip this step of they jump into programs that are mostly too advanced for most people. And even if you find what looks like a simple program online, you look at I want to get strong or lose some weight, and it's a general barbell program. There's some barbell back squatting there, some lunges, some bench press, your full body type stuff, but the foundation work isn't there. It's like, can you do a push-up? Do you have this one-sided, is one side stronger than the other? Are you moving well in all planes? And if you don't have that foundation built up first, then you're setting yourself up either to lose you're limiting the ability of performance you could eventually achieve, or you're setting yourself up for injury in the long term. And I think there's a couple ways to solve this. Is one, finding a really good coach is huge, or a good coach or a good gym. Right. But the other side of it is having some humility to be able to start a little lower and build up that foundation, and knowing that these things take time. And do you have I don't want to put set time frames on this, James, because I know you guys work with such a wide range, but how long can someone expect to have to spend on building up these foundations? Is this weeks? Is this months? Is this years?
Yeah. Right. And I think, so I think that's a broader question of what is the goal, and what if we predetermined in general how long it's going to take to achieve that goal, right? So it's like, well, I'd like to deadlift 300 pounds at some point. It's like, yeah, then we're looking at a year to 2 months, depending on where the person stands. So yeah, it's very individualized, but I guess it kind of depends on, okay. It's definitely goal dependent. But also it's like, I don't like to put, I think there's kind of some people come in and they're like, how long, when can I do this? When can I do this? When can I do this? And it's like, okay, like I want that for you too. And I'm not the one trying to hold you back. Right. Like, but you don't want to be paying us to just put stuff in your program. Like you could do that on your own. Right. So like we're coming in from a point of expertise. That's what you're getting when you work with a good coach. And it's one of those things where it's like, sometimes you do have to go, all right, take that goblet squat, and like you kind of have to check people a little bit, like with a program. It's like, okay, well, like take that goblet squat and just do that with perfect form, and just get really picky with every rep as a coach. nope, that wasn't good. You know, like that one doesn't count. Do 10 perfect ones. And they go, oh, okay. So there's like some of that going on. And it's like, and then it's like kind of that compliment sandwich thing. It's like, look, I'm the expert. I will get you where you want to be. Here's kind of where you're at. And then it's like, but that's still really good. Like what you just did with that 10 reps of a kettlebell goblet squat was more than you did last week. So like, but do you understand how this is a very slow progression, and I want you to get there, but this is the best way we know how, through science and things like that, to get you where you want to be. So yeah, I think it's really hard to generally put a timeline on things, but I think you do have to be very goal oriented. Otherwise, we get into that. We're just wandering. We're just coming into the gym. What is my goal for today? And you know, we can get it. That can get really stressful for people. Obviously, it's like, well, coming in 4 times a week, like, what if I don't feel like it's like, yep, that's a lesson you're going to learn too, because not every workout's going to be your best one. And so there's a lot of variables there, right? But yeah, I mean, programs generally advanced. I mean, unless someone's coming back from an injury, they might get kind of the same type of workout, and we might just manipulate things like load and volume and tempo and things like that. And it's like, yeah, do you see how tough that can be, just manipulating one of those things? It's like, right. So it's like, but you're building competency, like you're moving towards those goals, and here's what that is doing. So yeah, it really depends in terms of a time, but you know, you always got to bring it back to the person and say, hey, I know it feels like you're doing kettlebell goblet squats on a 2x4 for 2 months, but like, that's fine. And then it's also like, give them a lot of what they need. You know, we talk about this a lot, right? Like, give them a lot of what they need, a little bit of what they want, right? So it's like they feel like an athlete, or they've done something, they've broken a sweat, but they're also like doing the things that you need them to do as a coach.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you said there that I absolutely love, but I think the biggest thing for people listening would be keep your goal the goal, and know what the goal is. For a lot of people, and for some people listening, yes, your goal is going to be chasing performance. Maybe you are going for a 2 times or even more body weight squat or deadlift, and your program's going to have to look a little differently. But for
Yeah,
most people, for the majority of people, if you're trying to lean up a bit, if you're trying to look fit, get strong, not have pain in your joints, move better, and be able to do this for the next number of years, decades, then keep the goal, as in your goal is not to barbell back squat just because you see a lot of people barbell back squatting that may look really strong. You can achieve that same level of whatever you're chasing from doing some of these things, and you will be able to sustain that for longer. And that becomes fun. Then that's when training gets
totally.
fun, because
Exactly.
you're getting results. And okay, maybe I haven't put a barbell on my back yet, but my clothes are fitting better. I have more energy. I'm getting stronger. I feel better. So don't get distracted by these movements that you see that you're like, oh, but it would be really cool to barbell snatch. And like you
Right.
said earlier, if you want to barbell snatch because you're trying to get into some Olympic lifting and see what your body can do,
Sure.
absolutely go for it. But if you think that that's going to help you get somewhat closer to your goal, then you might get distracted and actually could harm your progress.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah, I think that's really hard, because I think when your long-term goals are really hard for a lot of people. And I think it's really easy to get distracted by, this is my, all right, well, this is my goal, but also, yeah, I see this shiny new thing on the way. It's like, I want to delve into some of that. It's like, hey, I hear you. Like, let's add that to the docket, maybe after we get to this goal. But, and the great thing about how we program is that you're getting a little bit of power, strength, mobility, conditioning, all in the same workout, right? So like, there's opportunities to learn how to clean with kettlebells in your power movements. So you start to build that skill while we're working on that heavy deadlift in your next block on that workout. So, but yeah, keeping the goal is really tough. It's something that I think we all struggle with, but
Yeah, absolutely. Myself included. And I think that's a good, the other side of that though, is that this doesn't mean that you shouldn't set performance goals. It's just knowing what those performance goals are. I think even for the person that is just looking to lose some weight, chasing performance goals over weight goals will lead to your weight goals. If you're setting those things, and it's just a matter of knowing what those things are, where it might not be a barbell back squat, but like you said, doing a set of 10 at a goblet squat at a certain weight. If you can do that, and if that's a big jump from where you are, you're probably going to be a lot closer to achieving those health
Right.
goals you're after. And do you guys use some of that? How do you guys track, and the accountability piece, I guess, the tracking? How do you know
Yeah.
if people are making progress, and how do you keep them excited about training too, for some of those things, of the people that are getting antsy to do more?
Yeah.
How do you keep them excited about it?
Yeah, that was a big well, I think it's having conversations about what their goals are. I mean, it's a big part of keeping them excited about stuff, and touching base. So the way we do it is 4 months of programming is one block. So we're touching base after every block. And we're seeing these people on a consistent basis. So, something changes, like we can talk about this, which is really nice about the models. We're constantly seeing people in person. But getting them excited about it's like what their goal, because I think sometimes the biggest thing for people is like naming a goal, and it's like no goal is too remedial on the way to something big, right? So it's like, we get some clients that are like, well, I was this marathoner and I was a really good athlete when I was younger, but that, I haven't trained for 3 years and I'm a mom. And it's like, okay, so I'm not viewing you as an ultra marathoner anymore or whatever, you're a general population person. I have to treat you that way because at this point you're detrained. And like, no, you're not saying that to them. You're finding ways to do that. But it's like, look, so maybe a goal for you is like, and I have them name 3. It's like, all right, well, here's things I want. And then I can help them shape that. It's like, all right, well, I think maybe I want to get 10 good push-ups off the floor. It's like, okay, well, that's a great goal. That's really measurable. So we can measure that, every session, and start them on, hands elevated push-ups, and move that bar down the shotgun rack until you're doing 2 sets of 8 off the floor. And now it's like, okay, great. Maybe you're ready for some barbell pressing now, or, what's the next goal? Because now you've opened this door. Is like, is that something you're interested in? Because I think we can start really working on that now. And I think what people realize is like, they come in with these, right? Everybody walks in our door and it's about, well, I'd like to lose this weight. And it's like, to this day, we've never had a member leave because they haven't hit their goal weight. Right. So I think that's a really important piece. And I think maybe a reason for that is that they're realizing, wow, that's pretty, like, I haven't really, in fact, I've probably gained a few pounds of muscle, but look what my body is able to do. And I can, squat 1.5 times my body weight now. And like, I'm really strong. And, we always get people in, well, I carried the water things up my stairs the other day and I'm feeling really good. And it's like, that's what it's about for me. Right. It's like, yeah, of course you're going to, in terms of tracking, like that's the stuff I'm worried about because that's measurable. Right. Yeah, research kind of shows, right? You're going to cyclically diet and you're going to kind of bounce out in and out of that. It's like, hey, look, if that's your goal, like by all means, but we're never going to use that as a measure of success in your time at our gym. Because you're exhibiting healthy behaviors. We know we're getting the conditioning, cardiorespiratory training in. We know that you're getting the strength in for the joint health and the back pain and the general exercise to lower all cause mortality rates. That has very little to do with your weight in that sense. So that's what we're focusing on. Yeah, sure. And then, if people have questions about nutrition, like, we have dietitians that we refer out to, and can ask specific questions about that. But yeah, so that's kind of the philosophy. But in terms of actual measuring like weights and stuff like that, we're actually really excited because we're starting to roll out True Coach as we reopen here after the quarantine a little bit. And you use an app as well, but having people be able to put what weight they're using, and then if they don't see that lift for like another month, and they're like, oh, I don't remember what I did. It's like, oh, well, your exercise history for the entire time you've ever done that lift is right at the bottom of that exercise. You can see where you're at. And it's like, so measurables are super important in terms of, because how do we know we're getting better? It comes back to that thing. It's like, we're just kind of walking around if we don't if we don't come in and have a message for the day. And it's like, yeah, maybe that's one more. Great. So here's what you did last week. Let's try to do this. Obviously that's dependent. Well, my back's kind of tweaking me this week. All right, let's lower the volume a little bit, or lower the weight. But yeah, before that, we were kind of in the midst of trying to develop like a proprietary tracking system in Excel, and that's just like, yeah, it's like you can make it work, or somebody's already done the work for you, and it becomes all our processes become very streamlined. So yeah, we're using TrueCoach now. I'm actually going in later today to kind of get some of our templates into the program and get ready to open on Friday. But yeah, because if you're not measuring anything, right, again, you're just kind of wandering. There's no direction, and I think that's really important when it comes down to people are paying you money. What are you showing them? And that's a big part. That's a health thing, and it's a business thing. You've got to, what is your product doing for people? So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with tracking. I don't want to make this an ad for TrueCoach, but like, yeah, it's like, TrueCoach will tell you what your attendance, where you're at from an attendance perspective in a certain given amount of time. And it's like, then we can have conversations about like, hey, look, yeah, if like we want to be hitting these goals, like we need more consistency in training, and you kind of got to be showing up. And if that goal is not important to you, I mean, we should probably have that conversation. But it's just like, right, it's just data if you don't know how to use it. And so I think that's what we're trying to do as we learn. Great, we have this raw data, we have these objective numbers. What does that mean? How does that inform our conversations with our members, and help get them to a point where they're understanding how their behavior and what their habits are affecting what their set goals are.
Yeah, that's so great. And that's tying that back in. It's having the data, and it's being able to connect the dots for people too, and show how that data is going to help them reach their goals. And you're going to love TrueCoach, and the app we use, people love, and it just helps to put some more objectivity and some measurables behind that. But a couple things that you were talking about too, I want to circle back on quick, is knowing, when we talk about knowing what the goals are and knowing how to track progress, because losing weight is one of the most popular goals out there. People want to lose weight, but I think, like you said, we don't focus on that. And I don't focus on that with a lot of people either, because that's usually not what their goal really is. And what I mean by that is people say they want to lose weight just because they think by losing weight by a smaller number on their scale that they will have those things of feeling strong, feeling confident in their body, feeling healthy, feeling those things. But what a lot of people find, and the people that it sounds like, and I know you guys work with, and that we get to work with as well, is that when you give them strength and help them move better and help them do those things like carrying water jugs up their stairs and being able to play with their kids and run around and do these things without feeling like they're getting hurt, that provides the feeling that people are after. And they realize that, hey, maybe weight loss isn't really my goal. I'm feeling better. I'm looking better. I'm more confident. Like, these are the things that I thought I was looking for in a number, and having those that's where tracking performance in some of those other areas, I think, is, if you're not doing that currently, is something that you can definitely benefit from, even if your goal is more aesthetics in nature, more to lose weight, to build confidence, to do some of those things.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's, and I think you start to realize it's like, yeah, we would all probably like to look like we did when we were 18 to 20 years old, but it's like, that's just not very realistic. It's like, you're just not going to do that. And then you start to ask yourself, where is that drive to lose weight coming from? And it's, obviously driven by society and, things like that. But I think, yeah, you can kind of draw a parallel to like, great, back in our export days, you'd see that dude, pulling 405 off the ground, but he looks awful. And it's like, great. Yeah. You can tell somebody that you pulled 405, but that quality wasn't great. And I don't really care that you did that if it just looks awful. Also, it's like, great. Yeah. You're in a bigger body or you're in a smaller body. That doesn't tell me much about what your health behaviors are. People in bigger bodies, like, yeah, look, I eat really good. And, what we know about weight is like genetics drives a lot of what we're going to look like. Like, look at your mom and dad, people's mom and dads. It's like, I'm probably going to look something like that. It's like, it's just genetics. And, when you look at like what dieting does, anytime our bodies don't want to be in, and I don't want to get in a huge nutrition thing here, but our bodies don't really want to be in restrictive states. Their main goal is to survive. And when you look at the statistics in terms of like 95, you have like a 5% success rate with dieting. Like that's not something like I'm going to sell you. Like, that's just not the truth. As a coach, I'm not going to sell you on like, oh yeah, cool, we'll get you down to like, single digit body fat. And it's like, okay, yeah, we do that. And then what? Like, that's not sustainable, and that comes back full circle to like why we do this. What are sustainable habits that people can do? And yes, nutrition plays a role in that, but it doesn't always have to be directed at how people's bodies are looking, right? Like, nobody's saying go eat 40 donuts, because that's not only going to affect your health, it's going to affect how you perform in the gym, right? Like, we know these things, but people know that fruits and vegetables are healthy for them. That's not the issue. Oftentimes, like, telling people to eat more fruits and vegetables, like, yes, they know that. It's why has it become such an obsession? And it's something that's probably socially driven a little bit, but anyway.
Yeah, I think a lot of good
tangent
points
there.
No, good tangent to go on. But I think the main points for those listening with that conversation would be, know what your goals are and evaluate, get a little deeper too on if it's to lose weight, connecting that to the why. And like James mentioned earlier, he asked for 3 goals, and then he can help summarize what the performance goals, what the workout goals might look like for that. So if you have the luxury of having a coach or community to go to your coach. If you haven't talked to them in a while, be like, hey, these are my goals. This is what I'm trying to do. Is this program helping me? Are there other things I can be doing? You might have to take accountability if you're in a place where those processes aren't already there, like you guys have, but you might have to go up to your coach and say like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Like, is this getting me there? Or are there other things I can be doing, not in the 1 hour I'm spending here that I could be doing? And if you guys don't have someone to bounce those ideas around, message one of us, let us know what it is. We'll, we can help guide those things too. We'd love to work with people on that and just give you guys some guidance on that, because it can be overwhelming. I know goal setting is not easy, and we don't know where to start with some of that stuff. So don't be afraid to reach out, shoot me a message, and we can help talk through some of those things too.
100%. Yeah. Get objective data, measure whatever you can, and understand how that is affecting your client's goals. I think that's a really good place to start, at least.
Yeah. 100%. No. And that's, James, we got so much good stuff there. I know we could talk for hours on some of this stuff, but
exactly.
I want to transition into the last part of our podcast here. And, when I approach you with this idea, and what listeners are hearing too, is when I started this podcast, I want to be full of good health and fitness info, full of good stuff that people can apply, because I think that's such a cornerstone for us in our lives. But at the same time, want it to be a podcast that's real for the listeners out there, especially for the guys out there that are striving. They're high achievers. They're trying to better themselves, better their lives, get healthy for the long term. And it's easy to look at someone in your position as a coach, as a trainer, as someone with authority and with this knowledge, and you have your health and fitness down, and it's easy to look from the outside and be like, oh, he's got it all together. There's no struggles. It's easy.
Right.
And we'd both be the first to admit that it is not the case at all. And we have challenges as it relates to health and fitness. We have challenges in plenty of other areas of our lives. So I think for someone looking from the outside on social media or listening to the podcast, can be potentially harmful to give the myth that we have it all together, we have it all figured out. So
yes,
if you wouldn't mind being real with our listeners, I'd love to hear a challenge you faced or are currently facing that's been a catalyst for your growth as a man.
Yeah. I think, so one of the big things for me early on was just understanding what I wanted out of life, right? If we just want to talk about, I'm assuming you're kind of the demographic is mostly male here. Yeah. So for me as a guy, it was, I mean, this is true for anyone, but getting more broadly out of just coaching or for the fitness industry or whatever, it's really defining in life what the hell you want. Like, what do you want? Because, and that can be really hard. But something that really challenged me in doing that was being introspective and getting to a point where I could be really comfortable calling myself out on my own stuff and picking sacrifices for myself. Because I think, and you know, I'll transition into a book that really helped me. There's a book called 12 Rules for Life by Dr. Jordan Peterson, if you've ever heard of it. Guy he's a clinical psychologist background, you know, professor at Harvard. He's like a modern day intellectual. The guy just thinks about everything so deeply in a level that I never could. And what a big thing for me was like, if I really want to help people, I know that's the case. I want to help people. And I think probably everyone does. And you're doing that no matter what your job is, whether you're a waiter or a coach or a PT or a doctor, whatever. But it's like, what is your trajectory and how can you help? How could I possibly hope to help anyone or be of use to the world in a positive way if I don't have my own life together? Right. And that sounds really dramatic, right? Because it's like, well, like, it's like not everybody's like, I'm not on the streets. I'm not like addicted to drugs or anything like that. But it's like, no, but there are things and habits that you form that can kind of inhibit you from achieving goals. And I think the sooner that you figure out what you want and what you're willing to sacrifice for those things, the better off you're going to be and the more meaningful life you can probably live. Because, you know, and so anyway, that was a huge thing for me. Reading that book, understanding, learning how to pick my sacrifices. Otherwise life picks them for you at a certain point, and you don't have you start to lose control. And you end up looking back, and it's scary. Like, it's scary to have to look at yourself and understand the world. You could do everything right also and still not come out on top. And so like, the world's hard, man. And like, I know that's very cliche, but it's like, figure it out, because it's super useful to kind of have that. Once you understand that, like, it is very scary, and it should be scary. Like, it should scare you, because if there weren't meaningful things in life and they didn't have some fear associated with them, we wouldn't find them worthwhile. So there's nothing heroic about doing things that are easy, or, you know, Peterson talks about a little bit in that book where it's like, you know, essentially that following things that are expedient have no sacrifice, right? So when we're constantly giving into these expedient, you know, endeavors that give us gratification, instant gratification, it's like, you're not really sacrificing anything. And when you start to figure out what sacrifice is, and that's different for everybody, you know, meaningful opportunities start to open up, and that behavior becomes lasting. And I think, you know, he talks about that, you know, and I kind of talked about it earlier as an applied concept for the gym, but it's like, if no task is too remedial in your life, like, are you getting up every morning? He has a big thing about making your bed. You know, how could you hope to solve the world's biggest problems if you can't even make your own bed? Right? Like, so it's like, start with that, and it really helps, right? Like, you get up and you're like doing this thing every day, and see how hard you can work, and see how many days of hard, consistent work you can string together. And I think you'll probably find that things start to open up for you a little bit, and that path starts to become a little bit clearer. So that's something that's been really big for me. Always trying to be introspective, always check myself, always be willing to abandon ideas and be wrong. And you kind of come out on life with this more balanced approach, so that when things kind of hit the fan, you don't sway too far in either direction, right? He talks a lot about like order and chaos, right? And like, chaos, it seems very dramatic, but chaos is just anything that's adverse, you know? And it's like, yeah, like when something bad happens, I'd like not to just cower in fear. I'd like to be able to endure. And like, that comes with having one foot in order and one foot in chaos, and being able to kind of stand on 2 feet when things get rough. So, Yeah, that's been really helpful. It's been a kind of a really realistic look at the world and how I relate, how I operate in that world. It's been huge for me.
I appreciate you sharing that. That's something that the the struggle is real with that, and those are the things outside of health and fitness that, especially as an introspection, something that I regularly do a lot of and have done a lot of, and it can be hard to confront ourselves head on and be like, am I really doing the things that I want to be doing? Am I living according to the purpose that I want to be living? Am I doing those things? Because when we have introspection, we start to see those things and we're like, huh, maybe I'm not doing as much as I think I am, or
Right.
maybe this path I'm on isn't the best way to get there. I need to change something. And that's hard for a couple of reasons. It's hard because it forces you to reevaluate and potentially make some significant shifts, but also it's hard to not let that be a defeating thing of like, oh, I'm always falling short and I'm doing those things, because introspection can lead to you feeling like you're falling short, and that's not the purpose of it either. And that's
Right.
something to be aware of. But those things are incredibly useful.
Yeah. And attacking purpose and meaning, and, as opposed to like fleeting emotions, like happy. Like, I just want to be happy. Well, that's very vague and very dangerous, because like you're just not going to be happy all the time. Like that's not like a very good goal. And it's like, okay, well, you're happy, but just as soon as you're happy, that changes in 15 minutes. So it's like, yeah, approach meaning, approach life with some sort of meaning. And yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's the gist.
Great stuff. Yeah. And I want to give listeners three takeaways that I took from this too. Is we talked through a lot of stuff on training and programming, and semi-private versus one-on-one versus big group. And to summarize, I wrote down a lot of things here, but a few of the key points that popped out for me, and I'll let you know what they are, James, and you can add anything if you see fit. But the first one I loved is that you talk a lot about building movement competency and feeling the movement when laying down the foundation. So spending a lot of that time working on building out a solid foundation and not skipping steps on the way there, making sure you're feeling the movement appropriately, performing it correctly before making those jumps. So those slow progressions over time. I love what you said about do a lot of what you need and some of what you want. That's I think that's a good lesson for people if they're doing their own programming or looking at their programming. It should be a lot of what you need, and some of that stuff might be stuff that you don't enjoy, but perfectly fine to sprinkle in a little bit of what you want. If there's things you just enjoy doing, exercises just for the sake of enjoyment, as long as they're not harmful or hurting you, keep them in the program. And last thing we kept harping on, keep the goal, and keep track of progress, have some measurables in place to make sure that you're moving in that direction. So those were three of the big things that popped up as we were talking here today. James, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's great. Yeah, no, I think you nailed it.
Sweet. So last thing, our hypothetical scenario we're going to close up with here. So you're leaving your favorite coffee shop and you bump into your younger self of 10 years back. So younger James asks current James for some life advice. You're on your way to a super important meeting and you only have 60 seconds to talk with him. What advice are you giving him and what do you say to him?
Yeah, I think, I think that 18-year-old James didn't have any direction. And I don't think a lot of 18-year-olds generally do. They're just kind of thrust into these things that it's like, but I think it probably wraps into some of what I was saying, right? There's start picking your sacrifices, start aiming for things that are as high as they can be in your sort of conception of the world, right? Pick a high point and start going for it, because what other choice do you have? Like, why would you, like, you could go for things that are mediocre, but like, what's the point in that? Like, pick high goals and set things high for yourself and figure out how you're going to get there. Because what other choice do you have in the world, right? You can't just pick things that are, I'm going to pick the lowest hanging fruit. It's like, that's not very meaningful. That's going to lead to something that's going to make you like live a life of meaning or purpose. So I would say that, like, start figuring it out, start making sacrifices now, and it's going to benefit you going forward.
Love it, James. This is so awesome. Appreciate you coming on. Let's wrap up today. Where can people find you? Where can they reach out to you, both locally and otherwise?
Yeah. So my Instagram is RCTF _James, all lowercase. can reach me by email, James at RCTF, or rc-fit.com. You can check out our website, Google RCTF, Oak Park, Illinois. That's it. That covers all of them, all the main ones.
Awesome. Make sure to reach out to James. If you guys have questions, reach out to myself. If anything, strike a chord with you from today's show. But James, thanks so much for coming on. Awesome having you.
Thanks for having me, man. Good talk.